We have good years, average years, and bad years. And so, leadership must be careful not to use the annual internal assessment as a club to beat down the employees or threaten them with pay cuts or layoffs. When organizations apply these 4 steps, the results can be very powerful. Let me give you an example of how the performance-based leadership model works when it's applied in an actual case study. Our case study company is Clark American Checks Incorporated. This company is an American company established in 1874, and it's based in San Antonio, Texas. Its primary business has been printing the checks that you and I use to pay our bills, just like these. Clark American Checks employs 3,300 people and generates over $470 million in annual revenues. Clark American serves over 4,000 financial institutions that it referred to as partners. In the past 50 years, the check printing business has grown from less than 7 billion paper checks written in 1950 to almost 70 billion paper checks written in 2000. But in the mid-1980s, as the check printing business became more competitive and consolidation became a way of life with banks and other financial institutions, it became very clear to Clark American Checks that simply being in the business of printing checks wasn't going to be enough to sustain its long-term growth and profitability. And so, facing imminent change and uncertainty, Clark American Checks began to reinvent its core business. The company decided, first and foremost, that because of the competitive nature of the check printing business, the key to long-term success was to be the very best in terms of its customer service and quality. They decided to see things differently. Instead of simply seeing the check, Clark American began to focus on the relationship surrounding the checking account and how people use those checks that Clark American printed. For example, Clark American's research found that people liked highly personalized and customized checks. They also found that the customer's experience with its checks determines opportunities for retention and growth. Also, by offering a broader product line than just checks, Clark American could help its financial institution partners cross-sell and even upsell checking services and products. And finally, the impact of service charges and banking fees for checking accounts and each check transaction played a major part in Clark American's relationship with customers and its financial institution partners. In 1986, Clark American Checks created a program entitled First in Service. The purpose of this program was to help Clark American's employees work together to manage and change their business in order to achieve their vision. In 1993, Clark American decided that its First in Service program would be its foundation for business excellence. It also has become Clark American's blueprint for success in terms of exceptional service and quality. According to Clark American Checks President and Chief Executive Officer Charles Corbell Jr., and I quote him, "First in service has been the cornerstone and map for our path to performance excellence," unquote. And so the question is, how did Charles Corbell and his key leadership team at Clark American Checks achieve such outstanding results in such a relatively short period of time? Corbell says it was the result of three important steps. Incidentally, you'll notice several of Clark American Checks' steps are similar to the steps I recommend in the performance-based leadership model. And here they are. Number one, Clark American Checks responded to the financial industry crisis by rewriting several key components of its organizational profile. For example, Clark American refined its vision statement. Today, their vision statement reads, and I quote, "To become a world-class customer management solutions company providing innovative, quality-driven solutions that delight our partners and customers," unquote. Secondly, Clark American Checks refined its mission statement to read, and I quote, "We will be recognized as a first-in-service company by our customers, partners, suppliers, and shareholders as a result of our commitment to superior services and quality performance. We will achieve long-term profitable growth by providing value-added, short-run printing, and related high-quality products and services to the financial institution market and other selected channels," unquote. Thirdly, Clark American Checks adopted core values such as customer first, integrity, and mutual respect, recognition, and teamwork as a way to communicate to its 3,300 employees how business will be conducted every day by every person, from the CEO to the custodian. In addition to these three important directional tools, Clark American Checks also adopted the Baldrige Award criteria for performance excellence as its roadmap to success. The bottom line for Clark American Checks has been nothing less than outstanding. The company survived the financial industry's crisis of 1993 and 1994 and has gone on to become highly profitable. Their first-in-service program has helped to establish Clark American as the undisputed leader in the check printing industry and made them a model for world-class benchmarking practices and, of course, their commitment to excellence paid off in 2001 by winning the company the coveted Malcolm Baldrige Award as well as the Texas Award for Performance Excellence. I hope you enjoy a happy ending to a case study as much as I do. And please note, the lessons of this case study are applicable to any organization worldwide and in all sectors of our economy. As we conclude this portion of today's program, I want to offer a few comparisons between managing and leading. I think you'll find this comparison very interesting. First of all, managers are objectives and goals motivated, while leaders are vision and mission inspired. Managers provide reasons and explanations, whereas leaders make promises and declarations. Managers tend to give attention to problems, whereas leaders focus their attention on potential. Managers spend their time changing things, whereas the leaders work on transforming people. Traditionally, managers have tried to motivate employees through controls and commands. A leader tries to affect change by empowering and training employees. And finally, just to finish up the example, traditional managers train managers, whereas leaders try to develop leaders. What an interesting comparison. By the way, if you'd like to have the entire list, please visit my website at www.tomhinton.com, and you can view it there. I hope you now have a clear understanding of how productive leadership can make a significant difference between an organization's success or its mediocre performance. There's no question that leadership is the key, and given the choice, I would encourage every organization to employ leaders who are performance-driven rather than reactionaries who let market conditions dictate their actions. When we return, I'll provide you with an excellent model to help you perform an organizational self-assessment. And we'll do this using the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions on this segment.
Let's begin with the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first call is from Colombia. It is from the Federación Nacional de Comerciantes en Medellín, known as FENALCO.
Buenos días.
Our question is the following. It's clear, just as we have explained here, that leadership is a key success element in companies and businesses. But some people instead, even though they are in very important positions and who have very high degrees and diplomas, they still are not inspiring anybody or leading anybody. And so what is the difference between leadership of power and authority? Thank you.
Well, I think it's a very powerful question. First of all, you have to keep in mind that there are many different leadership styles and types of leaders. So over the ages, no one particular style of leadership has necessarily proven more successful than another. And within corporations and educational institutions and certainly government, you're going to have the broadest array possible of different leadership styles and even methodologies. I think, going back to your question, the difference is that leadership is comprised of both inherited responsibility, that is, the responsibilities that an individual receives by virtue of his or her position. The president of a company obviously has much greater power than would a manager or a director of that same company. But then there's the area of power that comes by virtue of somebody's ability to motivate and inspire people, and that's personal power. And I think that, frankly, is the more effective way in an organization to get people to perform and to make a difference, according to the performance-based leadership model that we just discussed.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mexico. It is from the Universidad Tecnológica de Tecamachalco. It's in the city of Tecamachalco and the state of Tecamachalco in Mexico.
Greetings to everyone. Our question is the following. What is the influence that can have in our countries, in Latin American countries, all these different styles, cultural styles that we have as far as how to implement productive leadership in the different organizations? Thank you very much.
Well, this is a very good question because it addresses the fact that culturally we're different. The United States has certain types of leadership styles that allow for senior executives to do things or to say things, whereas perhaps in your country it's going to be slightly different because of the cultural differences. That may be to your advantage, depending on the type of business that you work for. But I think different styles ultimately have to answer three basic questions. Number one, the quality of your product and service. Secondly, your financial success as an organization. And thirdly, the retention and recruitment of good people. People that will help improve your quality, people that will mature into future leadership positions. So regardless of the particular style and cultural differences, which are a factor, I still feel that leadership ultimately comes down to those three very important factors.
We're going to go to backup question number 2 right now. It's from the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara in Guadalajara, Jalisco, in the state of Mexico. And let me read this one. Do you feel it's necessary for companies to apply for an award in order to improve their performance? Awards are important, but is part of the process for them to get into this award system, or can someone not worry about getting the award and just pay attention to their homegrown company?
It's an interesting question because it begs another question, and that is, how do you inspire and motivate the people in your organization to improve their performance? Now, I think it's a proven fact that over the ages, leaders like to win. And if you give leaders an incentive, such as an award program, to improve their performance or their quality, most likely they'll grab that carrot and they'll run with it because leaders like to win. On the other hand, Richard, I don't think it's necessarily important that a company applies for an award, but what it does is it focuses the energy and the scope of the people in that organization to concentrate on continuous improvement, looking at how they do things, the processes by which they do things, and then gradually improving those processes. And that's what the Baldrige Award and many of the National Quality Award programs offer. It's not so much the physical award, but it's the opportunity to improve processes in a very systematic approach. And I think that's why awards are a good incentive.
Our next question is from the Dominican Republic. It is from the Centro de Gestión e Investigación in the capital city of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Okay. I'm sorry, but we don't have our context right now. Let me ask you a question, if I may, while the next one comes in. We have seen emerging trends over the past 20 years, from quality to customer service to today's emphasis on financial performance. In your view, what will the next trend that leaders face, what will that be? Looking from here into the future.
Well, this is a good question because I think we're right in the midst, certainly in the United States and possibly in Argentina, in terms of this next emerging trend. And that is leadership's role in terms of guiding the organization ethically. In the United States, we've had a very difficult time with the Enron scandal. This is an energy company in Houston, Texas, and actually globally, that apparently its leaders misled not only the stockholders and the analysts on Wall Street, and as a result, they played with the financial numbers of the organization and misrepresented those numbers to the stockholders. And over a period of 8 months, that organization's stock price collapsed. And of course, the worst part of this is that their accounting firm allegedly was partnering with them to create false documents. When you have a loss of faith in an organization on the part of its employees and its investors, to me, that's the ultimate end of an organization's credibility. And so the question that Richard is asking here is one of ethics and credibility and the leader's ability to keep people focused on the core values. I talked about Clark American Check's core values, and they're very strong core values. And I would encourage every organization to have defined core values, of which integrity should be a part of it, so that you can have a very clear guiding light to help your employees practice ethical behavior.
Our next question is from Mexico. It's from the Universidad Tecnológica de Tecámac in the city of Tecámac in the state of Mexico, in Mexico City. in Mexico.
I'm Erica Mercado, and my question is the following. We are talking about leadership based on performance. And what are the important consequences of this model as far as the personnel, the staff within the organization? How does this affect them directly?
Well, thank you for your question. I think the consequences of the performance-based leadership model are really two. First of all, a successful company has more money, more customers, and obviously more wealth to perform its business. And that means that it can hire better people, it can expand its scope of business in its marketplace, and I think that's a very positive consequence of the leadership model that we've discussed. Now, on the negative side, if an organization does not perform, what happens? It loses market share, it loses customers, and eventually it's forced to lay off its employees and to shrink operations. So I think it's important, whether the leadership in an organization follows my model or some other model, that at least they have a guiding path, a criteria that they can follow that helps them systematically improve performance. And in the next part of our program, we're going to review the Malcolm Baldrige model for performance excellence. And I strongly endorse these types of leadership models to help organizations gradually improve their performance and expand their success in markets.
Our next question is from Cuba. It is from Cimatel in the capital city of La Havana, Cuba.
Buenos días. In Cuba, we have the national award granted by the government echelons, and we are competing for that award. In this regard, we would like to ask, the teams that you form to develop the strategy, should they be formed by leaders, or can you have other employees who are committed to this leadership of the company, or is it only for the high executives, or it can also the staff, qualified staff, participate in the team for this national prize award in Cuba?
Well, thank you, and good morning to Cuba. This is a very good question because it deals with the scope of how you form your teams in order to address the criteria within the national award. And I think there are two responses that I want to offer you. Number one, as I suggested in my opening remarks, I think it is important for the leadership to select the category champions. Now, in the Baldrige Award, there's 7 categories. So each category would have at least one champion to direct that particular category. Next, once the category champion is selected, I think this is where you want to involve as many people throughout all levels of the organization. So not just the senior level, but all levels of the organization, so that the work processes that are performed and relate to that particular category are well represented through the team. So yes, I would encourage as many different levels of the organization to be part of your team, and I congratulate you and commend you for applying for your national award. I think it's a very important step in building the morale and the quality of any company.
Next, we have a question from our neighbors in Baja California in Mexico. It's from the Centro Universitario de Tijuana. It's in the city of Tijuana in the state of Baja California in Mexico.
My question is, what would be the model that would help small companies, and is this similar to the model that big corporations are using? Small companies, small businesses use the same models as big corporations? Can they use the same model?
The question deals with one of scale. Can smaller companies use the same model as a larger company? And the short answer is yes, they can. However, there are some differences. First of all, smaller companies typically have fewer employees, and therefore those employees have many, many more responsibilities day in and day out. In my own organization of 12 people, for example, we have people who perform multiple tasks, many jobs. And so it's difficult for them to take the time, because we don't have extra people. It's difficult for them to take the time to perform certain quality checks or procedures that will consistently help us improve our performance. And I think that's the major difference between the small company and the larger companies. Larger companies have more people, more resources, so they can implement a model more quickly. So my advice to you, if you work in a small company, and by small, I would define that as probably 50 or fewer employees, allow yourself a longer period of time to implement this particular performance-based leadership model.
Our next question is also from Mexico. It's from the Universidad Autónoma de Chihuahua in the city of Chihuahua, in the state of Chihuahua, in Mexico.
Ramon Serna from Chihuahua, Mexico speaking. My question is the following. What are the main differences between the pyramidal organization of centuries past and the intelligent organization of the new millennium?
Well, I wasn't around centuries ago, so I can only offer you my opinion based on some research that I've read. I think there are probably three differences. Number one, as Richard asked me in the opening question about the impact of information technology, that is a dramatic difference that every company today has an advantage of over the companies in the 1800s, for example, or even the early 1900s.